Hi, and welcome back to Virtual Chapel. Today we invite you to lean in to worship as we take time to magnify and glorify the Lord for sending his son Jesus to die for us on the cross. What Jesus did on the cross for us was more than enough, and we are so thankful for that truth. Worship with us today.
Jesus, oh,
Let's pray. Father, thank you for the love you've shown us through sending your Son, Jesus, to die for us on the cross. Thank you that you didn't leave us in our sin, but that you gave our brokenness a solution. We thank you that we no longer have to live in fear, but we have been freed from sin and death, and we are accepted into your family. Lord, forgive us when we forget all that you've done for us. May we remember and understand your ultimate sacrifice through Jesus in every season of our life. If there's ever a time that we can't see you moving and working in our lives, we pray that you would point us back to the ways in which you have been faithful, including the faithfulness represented through Jesus on the cross. Thank you for being who you are and showing us that you are more than enough. And it's in your name we pray. Amen.
Welcome to chapel. Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sacks is going to help us get started today. He says, there is a moral dualism that sees good and evil as instincts within us, between which we must choose. But there is also what I will call a pathological dualism that sees humanity itself as radically divided into the unimpeachably good and the irredeemably bad. You are either one or the other. So in this episode, we are wrapping up with episode 3 of our coddling collection. And we've called this collection Coddled, Why Untruths Bring Us Comfort. We've been making our way through each of the great untruths, and so far we have hit untruth number 1. The untruth of fragility. What doesn't kill you makes you weaker. And then the next week, we talked about the untruth number 2, the untruth of emotional reasoning. Always trust your feelings. And I love the way that Corey put it. He said, our emotions always tell us something true about us, but they are not always trustworthy. And so we must take our thoughts captive to Christ. And now we are going to move into untruth number 3, the untruth of us versus them. Life is a battle between the good people and the evil people. So Haid argues, from an evolutionary psychology perspective, we are hardwired to form tribes. Our ancestors needed to rely on tribes for survival, and tribes allowed groups of people to form strategic alliances for long-term collaboration. Now, sometimes one tribe would make war on another to expand, to secure future resources, to ensure safety. And tribes, in and of themselves, are a good thing. When God put Adam in the garden, God instructed Adam to make the rest of the untamed earth look like the beauty and order that he had created in the garden. And this only happens, this presupposes that Adam and Eve would build out a community, would build out into a tribe. They would create a larger, co-laboring tribe for the good of the planet, where they would bring beauty and shalom to the rest of the earth. Tribes are actually an all right thing. They connect us with people who share a common vision, a common future, a common project, a common language. Tribes can be good. Now, in modernity, we don't call them tribes. They're called corporations or cliques or a team or a nation or a school or a Reddit thread or a podcast that you religiously listen to. To borrow language again from Haid, he says we're groupish. We squad up to form larger pods of people who look like us, who are in the same age group as us, who share the same language and vocabulary as us, who are like-minded, who share similar beliefs, or what he calls a moral matrix. And now, tribes can be a good thing. They can be a God-given desire to connect and co-labor. But there's also a shadow side to our groupishness. There's also a shadow side to our groupishness. It's when our love for a tribe turns into tribalism. Tribalism. It's when your good group identity morphs into unconditional loyalty, rationalizing, demeaning outsiders, punishing dissenters. Tribalism is a whole other animal. It takes the good things that a tribe offers and twists them into something negative. And in this cultural moment, we really don't need to look far to find tribalism. It's almost cliche at this point to reference the extreme political and social polarization that we have around us. See, when political analysts say that America is as divided at rates not seen since the Civil War, we almost roll our eyes and say, yep, I've heard that one before. But I think this reality of tribalism actually weighs on us more than we would like to admit. And often the most vulnerable around us bear the brunt of this. And so I considered taking time to go through politics, religion, families, to map out how tribalism breaks down and give you the anatomy of what unhealthy tribalism, what tribalism does to you and to your community, and how to identify it. But I don't think I need to make that case for you. I think of all the great untruths, this is the one that is most readily identifiable, and the one that when I go to engage it, when I go to write a message about tribalism, I feel the most exasperated. Because I just see on social media, in conversations with family and friends and beyond, that people are talking past one another. That people are getting more and more entrenched in their views, and they are retreating to online safe harbor communities that just repeat and parrot back the exact same thing they've heard before, that are ignoring information that challenges their assumptions, that demonizes those who disagree, that creates a virtual coliseum where we cheer and hop on the bandwagon as we see someone we don't like or disagree with eviscerated online. I see people interpreting other people uncharitably because few are seeking to understand. They're seeking to just speak and get retweets or likes, and sometimes even acting out in violence. See, tribalism can be a very dangerous thing. And I find myself at a loss for words for what it will take to move forward. But I want in this moment to just try to chart a course out of the us versus them mentality by taking a look at the way of Jesus. What would Jesus and the good news of the kingdom have to say to our tribalism? Well, the first thing is I think we'll notice that in the us versus them paradigm, Jesus redefines us. He redefines us. There's always been something uniquely bizarre about those who followed Jesus when he was on the earth. And you get this feeling that the gospel writers, when you read through the four gospels, the four biographies of Jesus, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, that they are scrambling to document this insane collection of insiders and outsiders, of the religious elite that are sneaking around in the middle of the night to meet with Jesus, that you see the imperial soldier begging for him to heal his daughter, that you see the ultra-wealthy asking for spiritual absolution. You see the lepers who dared to approach him when they should be far off. You see the respected business people buying into the church and financing the church's operations. You see the demon-possessed, the prostitutes, the insiders, and the outsiders. And it wasn't just a ragtag group of a large posse that followed him around and made sure that they were at any event that he was doing. You have this bizarre collection of the 12 disciples that Jesus actually called. Because this, I think, is the actual most bizarre of all. You have the people who Jesus chose to follow him, where Jesus went and sought them out for them to follow Jesus for 3 years. And so we turn to Matthew 10 to get a picture of who the 12 are. So Matthew 10, it says, the names of the 12 apostles are these. First, Simon, who's called Peter, and Andrew his brother, James the son of Zebedee, and John his brother, Philip and Bartholomew, Thomas and Matthew the tax collector, James the son of Alphaeus and Thaddeus, Simon the Zealot, and Judas Iscariot, who betrayed him. Now, most of the names mentioned here either have their hometown or their familiar relation. 3 times in this list of 12, we get other information. We see that Matthew is a tax collector, Simon is a zealot, and Judas is the one who betrayed Jesus. And the last one, Judas, is kind of the author giving us a preview for what's going to happen later on in the book. But if you were a first century Roman or a Jew reading through this list, your jaw would have dropped to the floor to see a tax collector and a zealot together. Because the zealots were an extreme nationalistic wing of the Jewish people who believed that any taxation or capitulation to imperial Rome was an absolute abomination. It was a desecration of everything that God had built. And the zealots, they even opposed the Greek language in Palestine, and they believed the coming Messiah would arrive and crush Rome in their lifetime. And that the Messiah would bring the true reign of Israel for 1,000 years. And they sometimes even resorted to terrorism and acts of political assassinations, which is how they got the name Sicarii, or dagger men. This is the guy that Jesus invited in. By contrast, the Roman government hired local people to ensure that taxes were properly collected on goods and services. And instead of paying them, the Romans allowed them to set their own fee on top of the taxes owed. And so these tax collectors, or they were commonly known as publicans, were wealthy elite who had chosen in this struggle between Rome and Israel to ally with the ruling class against their people. These men were hated by their people because they had chosen Rome and lined their pockets while Rome oppressed Israel. They were financing the oppression of their own people. And according to William Cave, a common proverb at the time was, "Take not a wife out of a family wherein there is a publican or tax collector." Why? For they are all publicans, the entire family is, or thieves, robbers, and wicked sinners. And so this is even more interesting when you realize that the author of the text that we just read about the 12 was written by the very Matthew who's identified as a tax collector. He's telling us that it's a big deal for the tax collector and the zealot to be in an intimate group following Jesus for 3 years, that they are in the same community for years. Do you think that as they're around the fire at night that Rome and Israel ever came up? Do you think it ever got heated? So what's the point? What's the point? In the us versus them dynamic, Jesus redefines us. So he won't let you draw a circle around who you think us should be. He won't let you draw a circle around just what neatly fits your tribe, what you think is best to keep small. Jesus won't settle for it. He's not going to settle for a narrowly defined us. He's not going to settle for just the tax collector or just the zealot. He brings them both in to his discipleship and calls them to look more like him. His call to take up your cross and follow me is not limited to our tribe and our tribalism. And that's actually a good thing. That's actually a positive thing, because I don't need to pass someone else's religious, ideological, political test in order to be with Jesus. Matthew and Simon are both in discipleship to Jesus. And that's enough. That's where they experience transformation. It was enough for Matthew and Simon, and it's enough for us. The second thing that we see Jesus does is Jesus redefines them. In the us versus them paradigm, Jesus redefines them. There's an interesting study done by a neuroscientist, David Eagleman, wherein he conducted a series of experiments with patients hooked up to an fMRI to get a peek at their brains when they played videos of other people's hands getting pricked by either a needle or touched by a Q-tip. Interestingly, when the hand being pricked by a needle was labeled with the participant's own religion, the area of the participant's brain that handles pain showed a larger spike of activity than when the hand was pricked by somebody labeled with a different religion. And so he tried the same experiment. So that was interesting, but he tried the same experiment, but he used completely made-up groups. Completely arbitrary, made-up groups, like this person could flip heads 3 times in a row, and you are of that same group. And so it reads, when arbitrary groups were created, immediately before the subject entered the fMRI machine, and the hand being pricked was labeled as belonging to the same arbitrary group as the participant, even though the group hadn't even existed just moments earlier. The participant's brain still showed a larger spike. We just don't feel as much empathy for those we see as other. We just don't feel as much empathy for those we see as other. That's tragic. But it's a helpful explainer why we can feel so justified posting cruel things about this politician or laughing at twisted jokes from our favorite podcast show. We drink the Kool-Aid of otherism, and we reinforce the lack of empathy for those that we've labeled as an outsider, because we can all laugh at how stupid and how hypocritical they are. We can laugh at them. They're the morons. They said, what? And I think we all agree that they're idiots, right? We all absolutely agree. They are just dumb as rocks. And they want to see the country, they want to see your group, they want to see your religious affiliation crushed to the ground. And so, yeah, they're the dumb ones. They're the dangerous ones. They're the ones you need to watch out for. They're the one that we need to rally around and actually oppress and get rid of. Do you see the othering? Do you see that we do whatever we can to keep people otherized? Because then we don't have to have as much empathy for them. In the words of Martin Luther King, he says, like an unchecked cancer, hate or tribalism or otherism or theying people corrodes the personality and eats away at its vital unity. Hate destroys a man and woman's sense of values and his objectivity. It causes him to describe the beautiful as ugly and the ugly as beautiful, and to confuse the true with the false and the false with the true. When you otherize people, when you delight in that kind of a culture, when you sit in that tribalism, your moral compass, your understanding of beauty, your ability to connect to others and to God, King is saying it actually erodes you and it's killing you like a cancer. Othering people. Jesus places them in the category of the loved, of the beloved. Where we would want to place them in the category of the untouchables, Jesus wants to save us from that by inviting us into a cosmic story, which brings me to the third thing that Jesus does. He reverses the verses. In the us versus them, he reverses the verses, because this is a story that transcends our tribalism and is, again quoting King, capable of turning an enemy into a friend. It's the story of Jesus' personal and transformational love that completely remakes the world, and his pursuit for a tribalistic, broken, divided, sinful humanity, both personally and systemically, that in his death and resurrection, Jesus put to death the tribalism that is within us, and he replaces it with love. Love even for your enemies. But I want to get into, what does this practically look like? Like, what does this actually look like on the day today? Well, I have 3 suggestions. The first is to be aware of your moral matrix. Be aware of your moral matrix. Does this mean that we don't pursue justice, or we argue out hard ideas, or what do we do with racism and sexism? How do I approach my parents and friends who have these insane beliefs? Number 1, be aware of your moral matrix. In The Righteous Mind, Haidt talks about morality like a tongue with taste receptors. Like a tongue with different taste receptors. Because some people like saltier food, some like sweeter food, some can tolerate spiciness and different kinds of spiciness, and some can't. And it's not good and it's not bad, it's just different, and people prefer different kinds of food. Similarly, through a series of extensive surveys, Haidt identifies 6 moral foundations that exist for every person. Now, he's not talking moral relativism, because that's just not what he's getting at. He's trying to identify and create a map for us to understand the moral system of people around us. So he identifies 6 moral foundations that exist for each person. He's identifying why my moral schema can be so different from your moral schema, and neither of us have to necessarily, in that instance, be objectively or morally wrong. And so we'll just work through them really quickly. You see care and harm. If we go back to the tongue, you see care and harm. You have fairness versus cheating. You have liberty and oppression, loyalty and betrayal, authority and subversion, and then sanctity and degradation. And these, he says, are the 6 arenas where we construct our moral foundations. We collect these into a kind of a grid through which we filter our news, our information, our friendships, our conversation, the learnings that we have. And so his core argument is that libertarians and conservatives differently organize these into their own moral matrix. That 1 or 2 of these values drive a majority of our decision-making, a majority of our moral judgments, And again, it's not about right or wrong, but about the lenses through which you view the world. And since you can't fix and care about every single issue everywhere on the planet all at once, what do you most value? Now, Haidt, writing as a self-affirmed liberal, he would describe himself that way. He says that when we look at liberals, liberals prioritize care and harm and fairness and cheating above all else. They value, their most sacred value is care for the oppressed, to the neglect of most of the other values that we have. It's just that their primary is care and harm. It's not that they don't value the other ones, but they are subservient to the care and harm value. Libertarians, above all, care about liberty and oppression and fairness and cheating, and all of the other values fall under the category of liberty and oppression. And so their most sacred value is individual liberty. So when it comes to care and harm, sanctity, degradation, authority and subversion, they approach a lot of social and moral issues through the lens of liberty and oppression above all. And conservatives, Haidt argues, has a primary motivation to preserve hard-fought and delicate institutions and traditions that sustain a moral community. And this was interesting to me. He argues that on the spectrum, no one of these stands out among the rest, but they are all valued equally, and that's primarily because conservatives, and he's talking politically, conservatives value preserving the institution, and all of these conservatives see as necessary for preserving the institution. Now again, one of these models is not better or worse than another, because in certain times, in certain situations, you are going to choose one over the other. You can go to the next one. So you see the liberals have this paradigm, libertarians have this paradigm, and conservatives have this paradigm. And here is his point. Knowing your moral matrix, knowing your own moral matrix, how you'd conceive of these 6 foundational moral paradigms, it helps you understand others. I mean, why do your parents so seem to misunderstand your values? Why is it that in certain conversations you don't feel like you can get past a certain point? Or when you want to talk about racial justice, somebody comes up and brings up authority. It's because we're operating with different paradigms. Maybe you're operating with different moral matrices, and this can build empathy. Understanding this can build tolerance towards other people, and it can build a willingness to listen. And I have a sneaking suspicion that if you were to overlay generations on that kind of a 3-paradigm moral matrix, the liberals, libertarians, and conservatives, that you'd see significant generational differences in how they actually value the different elements of their moral foundation. That brings me to the second thing. Second, I want us to listen. Actually listen. I want us to actually listen. Don't listen to respond. Don't listen to fight back. Listen to understand. Listen to understand. But isn't there a time I should talk? You should probably chill. Listen. You can practice what Julian Treasure calls rasa. And if you're in my introductory to communications class, you'd know because we come across this. He says rasa, the ability to listen. It's an acronym and it breaks down to receive, appreciate, summarize, and ask. Ask follow-up questions to continue this listening process. Rasa, receive, appreciate, summarize, and ask. And now, you don't just listen to those people that you agree with. That's confirmation and selection bias, and that is kind of against everything that we're talking about here. It erodes your ability to think, confirmation and selection bias does. So I want you to listen to people who might have different perspectives than you and be open to understanding and learning from them. Third, the third piece of practical advice that I would give you as an extension of our talk on tribalism. receive the love of Jesus. Receive the love of Jesus. It's the love of Jesus that redefines the us in us versus them. Because we were the ones that Jesus drew a larger circle around and said, you are with me and joined with me. It's the love of Jesus that invited you into his tribe. It's the love of Jesus that does not reject you when you're wrong. And you'll be wrong a lot in your life. And if you don't look back a year ago and say, hey, I think I was wrong about a couple things, it's the love of Jesus that turns the them into a friend. It's the love of Jesus that reverses the verses and does not allow you to keep moving forward at an antagonistic mindset towards human beings made in the image of God who are probably trying to create a better future for their children as well. It's the love of Jesus that reaches across the divides and provides a common ground matrix for us to sit and talk and connect. It's the love of Jesus that enables us to listen. It's the love of Jesus that transforms you into a more patient and a more loving person. It's the love of Jesus that extends kindness to you when you hurt and misrepresent others. And when you know that that is not the strongest form of the argument and you are making straw man arguments or you are summarizing them uncharitably, which I think we should agree is probably on the verge, if not stepping into sinful behavior. It's the love of Jesus that actually extends you kindness in that. It's the love of Jesus that rescues us. It's the love of Jesus that rescues me from the us versus them paradigm. Thank you, and have a good rest of your day.